Now we will discuss certain clinical scenarios related with that. For example, they are saying that um, when you change the direction of movement rapidly, for example, you are running in one direction and then you turn in one direction, or your head is moving side by side, forwards, backwards, in any direction, there is change in the angular acceleration. So our eyes will not be able to maintain a static image on the retina, and we need to get a image on the retina and to get a meaning behind the image, we need to have the eyes focused on that thing for a longer amount of time. So how does our body and our brain get apprised of the change in direction, and how do we get the signals even when we are rotating our head? It is because the semicircular ducts, which are responsible for detection of angular acceleration, they cause the eyes to rotate in equal and opposite direction. Because of this equal and opposite direction of motion of the eyes, reflexes are because of this equal and opposite direction, the eyes get a good view of the surroundings and we can get apprised of what is happening around us. The movement of the eyes, why do they move in the equal and opposite direction? It is because reflexes, they are transmitted through the vestibular nuclei. I told you, when the signals of rotation etc they are strong, so signals will go from the vestibular nuclei to the through the medial longitudinal fasciculus into the oculomotor nucleus. The oculomotor nucleus is associated with changing in the direction of motion of the eyes. So this change in directional motion or position will apprise the vestibular nucleus, which will cause the medial longitudinal fasciculus to transmit information to oculomotor nucleus, which will change the direction of motion of our eyes in equal and opposite direction to the motion taking place. So now they're saying that the vestibular apparatus, the whole system that we have studied about the cochlea, the semicircular canal, and the sacule and utricle, it apprises the brain of only the position of the head. So position of the head with respect to the body, how do we get that position? It is maintained, or it is supplied through the neck proprioceptors. The proprioceptors of the neck, they are going to send signals directly to the vestibular nuclei and to the reticular nuclei. So what will happen? There is this neck, okay? So the neck will send signals directly via the vestibular nuclei or reticular nuclei to the brain, or neck will send signals indirectly via the cerebellum to the cortex. So the signals can be directly via two nuclei, vestibular or reticular, to the brain, or indirectly through the cerebellum to the cerebral cortex. So these movements, for example, when a person is bending downward with respect to the body, so what will happen in such a situation? That the vestibular system is sending another signals related to head, and the neck system is sending signals that are opposite to the vestibular system to apprise the body that there is a change in direction of the head with respect to body. But now if the whole body is like falling from the building, the neck and the whole body is moving in the same direction, so the signals of the head and the neck will not be opposed from each other. So the body will not get to know about the change of position of the head with respect to the torso or the dorsum. Also, the major effect of these neck signals and the signals of the head being opposite to each other prevents our body to have a sense of disequilibrium. Now, according to our book, they are saying that signals from not only the head and not only the neck are important, but signals from the rest of the body are important as well to maintain equilibrium. For example, the foot pad, the signals from foot pad are especially important to know whether the weight of the body is equally distributed on the feet. Secondly, if the weight of the feet is more forward or backward, because for example, if you have more weight on the forward feet, or the foot that is a little bit anterior to your body, what will happen? You will fall on that direction. Similarly, if you have more weight on the back side, you will fall in the backward direction. So it is important to know that there is equal distribution of weight, and either the weight is distributed more in one leg or in the other. Secondly, extroceptive information. Extroceptive means from the outer respect, from apart from head, apart from neck, apart from other portions, the extroceptive information is necessary to maintain equilibrium. For example, if a person is running and he receives, because when we are running we are facing this air resistance which is striking our body in the opposite direction to the gravitational pull. So to prevent our body from and our brain from getting a shock because of the air resistance, what is a normal mechanism? That our body will lean forward. So this will be the posture for running, and when we will be able to maintain a proper equilibrium and proper um, force against the air resistance, then we will maintain our normal position. So this is how with the start of running your body bends forward to oppose the force of air resistance. Now they are saying that eyes are so vital organs that with the damage of the vestibular apparatus, or from the exteroceptive information or proprioceptive information from the other body portions, when your eyes are open, you are able to maintain normal equilibrium even if there is bilateral destruction of your vestibular apparatus. But what happens is that there is whenever you are doing some linear acceleration, you are moving your eyes, and the vision or the image that are being made on the retina, they start to change, as a result of which your brain is apprised of the change in position, and hence you are able to maintain equilibrium. But the eyes, in the bilateral destruction of the vestibular apparatus, the eyes can help in the equilibrium only if they are open. Secondly, if the motions are performed very slowly. But with the bilateral destruction of vestibular apparatus, if the eyes are closed and motions are performed very fastly, then you will have disequilibrium and you will not be able to maintain the equilibrium only by means of your eyes. So now they are saying that signals from the vestibular apparatus can go via the vestibular nerve to the vestibular nuclei, which is present at the junction of like the medulla and the pons, and then the second order neurons from there they can go into cerebellum, to the vestibulospinal tract, to reticular nuclei, to medial longitudinal fasciculus. So this is how vestibular nuclei, they are forming connections with the spinal cord through vestibular spinal tract, from medial longitudinal fasciculus to the oculomotor nucleus, from reticular nuclei and to the cerebellum. Signals can also, some fibers and signals can also travel to brainstem, reticular nuclei without any synapses, or they can go into cerebellar, vestigial, uvular, or flocculonodular lobes. So one pathway is this, the other two pathways are this, through which the vestibular nerve can relate signals. Now, after the vestibular nerve receives the signals from the vestibular apparatus and is activated, it is majorly going to go into this vestibular nuclei. From here, the signals will go into the cerebellum, but also the vestibular nuclei will send sub signals to red nucleus or reticular nucleus, and from here the signals can go down into the spinal cord, that is via the reticulospinal tract, that is from reticular substance, or via the vestibular spinal tract from the vestibular nuclei. So one thing over here is from the vestibular nerve into the vestibular nucleus into the cerebellum, but now signals can go even into the reticular substance, and from there they can go through the spinal cord via vestibulospinal or reticulospinal tracts. And these vestibulospinal and reticulospinal tracts, they help to distinguish facilitation and inhibition of the anti-gravity muscles, which will help us to maintain our equilibrium. Now when we talked about the semicircular ducts, I told you the semicircular ducts, the ducts 3, they were anterior, posterior and lateral. They are going to send their signals via their vestibular nerve to the flocculonodular lobe of the cerebellum. So any destruction of the flocculonodular lobe or of the semicircular duct produces same signals or same motion, that is loss of the dynamic equilibrium. So any rapid change of motion, it will be difficult to detect it and there will be disequilibrium in that. But as I told you, the static equilibrium, it was concerned by macula, and macula were related to uvula of the cerebellum. So destruction of one thing, that is flocculonodular lobe, will only affect dynamic equilibrium and not the static equilibrium, because static equilibrium is concerned with uvula of the cerebellum. So now what happens is that the paragraph has been very complicatedly written, but now let's have a look over here. Now the corrective movement of the eye, whenever our head rotates, they are transmitted via the vestibular nuclei and the cerebellum through the medial longitudinal fasciculus into cerebral cortex. Or The other pathway for the vestibular nuclei and cerebellum to send these signals to the cerebral cortex can be reticular tracts. So these medial longitudinal fasciculus or reticular tracts, they are sending the corrective movements of the eye every time our head rotates. Now in the cerebral cortex, in which location is this equilibrium center? That primary cortical center that is concerned with equilibrium, it is located in the parietal lobe and deep in the sylvian fissure. As you know, there is your brain, and your brain has a lot of lobes. This was the frontal lobe, this was the parietal lobe over here, this was frontal, this was parietal, this was occipital, this was temporal. So in the sylvian fissure of the parietal lobe, we have the primary cortical center associated with equilibrium. Now they are saying that opposite to this sylvian fissure is actually this one, which is like a snake. So this sylvian fissure, deep to the sylvian fissure, is location of the primary cortical center for equilibrium. Now opposite to this fissure, in the superior temporal gyrus region of the temporal lobe, there are signals. There is this auditory area which is sending psyche signals of equilibrium status of the body. So this is how the things take place. The vestibular nuclei and cerebellum, they send signal to cerebral cortex via reticular tract, via medial longitudinal fasciculus, and in which location of the cerebral cortex? They are in the sylvian fissure of the parietal lobe. We have the primary cortical center for equilibrium. Now also opposite to the fissure, in the auditory region which is in the superior temporal gyrus, the psyche for equilibrium status of the body is sent to the brain. So they are saying that in a condition called anencephaly, what happens is that your brainstem is developed, but anything above the brainstem is not present, like the cerebral cortex is not present. So all the stereotype movement that are controlled by the brainstem will still be intact. What are the stereotype movements? The stereotype movements are especially the suckling action. If there is unpleasant food, they are going to throw it out. Then moving of the hands to the mouth to suck the fingers. Then crying, following the objects with like your eyes. Then if you are placing some pressure on their thighs, then they can even sit up. So these type of children with the anencephaly, they rarely exist because they can only stay for like few months. But in these few months, they could think of that, and they check them that they can perform the functions that are stereotypical motions, which are majorly controlled by your brainstem. Apart from that, the complex function, the cerebral cortex function, because they do not have cerebral cortex, so they do not have all those functions in them. So with that, we are done with the vestibular apparatus and all its clinicals.